Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I will be reviewing the latest season of the British reality TV series, The Circle, which is a show that I just recently got into after the entire Big Brother community seemed to latch onto the show during the off-season. And while I was initially busy when the show started, I did jump onto the bandwagon about a week before the finale of Season 2, and in 5 days, I binged the entire series up to that point, and was able to catch up by the time of the finale. So why not do a video on it? So here I will be talking about my spoiler-filled thoughts on Series 2 of The Circle, talking about its format changes, twists, and the cast. So let's get started. So let's talk about the format changes from Season 1. The biggest one here is the new host in Emma Willis, who was a good addition to the show. I mean, I did watch a few seasons of BBUK, and Emma was a host on that, and she's a pretty solid host. I do think she's a bit biased on certain things. You can definitely tell that she was trying to move forward her own narrative, and I feel like also the producers were doing that as well during the season. But outside of those things, I do think Emma is a pretty fun host. But with the addition of Emma also came weekly live shows, and they definitely had their pros and cons. I mean, I liked the interviews with the recently blocked players, revealing all the secrets to them, and seeing their reactions. But outside of that, I think almost everything else about it is pretty bad. I think they were very poorly produced, where they would have clips of the contestants in the background that would spoil some of the reactions, specifically with like people's reactions to Sammy. I really hated that first live show where they added these quote-unquote celebrities to give their thoughts. It just felt like a massive waste of time. Really, almost the entire live show element of it was a waste of time in my opinion. I would rather just see footage from the actual game, but instead we were just getting pretty pointless interviews that really ruined the pacing of those episodes. And speaking of pacing, I feel like the season was very bloated. I felt like with Season 1, I felt like it was a pretty consistent ride the entire way through. With this season, I felt like that middle section really dragged on. I mean, the beginning of the season was fun, the end of the season was fun, but that like middle, like probably 10 episode stretch did get pretty boring for me. Now, they did also change the rating system this season from rating each person out of 5 to ranking them. And I have two minds of this change. I do feel like the original system fit the theme better and was more entertaining to watch. As I feel like with this ranking system, it kind of became hard to keep track of how people were being rated when they kept on jumping around to like, oh, first place, second place, third place. It's like, it just kind of went all over the place. But I understand why they did it. I mean, from a game standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, they want to get obviously more accurate scores, and they want to avoid the occurrence of a tie. Obviously, a tie still happens, but with this new system, it makes it much more difficult for a tie to occur. I mean, the old system, to be honest, was pretty flawed, where if someone wanted to, they could just rate everyone a 1, with the exception of one person, because I believe there was a rule against that. But you could just rank everyone really, really low, which ruins the point of the rating system to begin with. So with this ranking system, it forces you to rate people positively. So I get why they did it from a game perspective, but it just isn't as fun to watch. Now let's talk about some of the twists. I mean, starting with the Richard Madeley twist, which I should mention, I had no clue who this guy is. But the concept of a 63-year-old morning TV show host, like coming in to a game like this, pretending to be a young, attractive woman is the most ridiculous concept I've ever seen, possibly in the history of reality television, and because of that, it was fun to watch. I think Richard himself was really funny on this show, but I still find it weird that he was put in there to begin with as a non-player and was forced to get himself blocked. But with that being said, it was pretty entertaining to watch nonetheless. The Joyce twist was a pretty fun one conceptually, where having two people play as one person is a cool idea, and having those two people be complete strangers who were just blocked from the game is an even better idea. But I don't feel like it worked out as well as it could have. I mean, it could have been more interesting if Beth and Jack hated each other and were arguing over everything to say, but they liked each other, so that didn't happen. And entertainment-wise, I mean, we did get some entertainment from this twist. I mean, mostly with Beth and Jack just being terrible at the game, though they did do some impressive detective work towards the end of their run. I don't love how much influence the public seemed to have on this season, though, especially in comparison to Season 1, where in Season 1, the public had no real influence on the game. And while this season doesn't do the worst it could do in that aspect, I don't love how Woody was voted the super influencer by the public. I mean, if used correctly, that is a ridiculously powerful power, where that could radically change the entire game. having the sole power to vote out someone in the game. I mean, that's ridiculous. Especially when you're just being handed that by the public. Like, it's literally a more powerful version of like the coup d'etat from Big Brother US. I just felt like it was completely overboard. I also didn't love the parts where they had 2 potential people to move in and only one actually got into the game. I felt like that was just cruel and unnecessary for the players that didn't get in, as they were sequestered just like everyone else. So the fact that they were just like sitting in sequester for weeks just to find out that they're not even going to be entering the game anyway, and now probably have no shot of ever playing the game again anyway, it just kind of sucks. So now let's talk about the cast. I felt like this was a solid cast, but I do find it a bit weaker than season 1's. But I really liked the initial group of 8 that entered the house, and was pretty disappointed when each of them got blocked. I just feel like a lot of those that came in a bit later were just not nearly as interesting. So let's start talking about each player, starting with the first boot, Amel, who I thought had a lot of potential to be really entertaining on the show, with her lying that she was straight and her really just being a really fun personality. So I was pretty sad to see her go home really early there. But to see her go home in a pretty strategic move by Sammy, I thought that was pretty interesting. Sai was someone that I found pretty boring in the premiere, and really was the person that I felt like was the least memorable after the premiere. But I started to like him a lot more of every passing episode. I thought he had pretty humorous comments and was generally just pretty naive about everything. I loved his exit interview of Emma, where it was such a train wreck, as he would accidentally spoil things that they hadn't aired yet. And I think really that's the fault of the producers. But overall, it was really fun to watch. Katie was a pretty fun character on the show, with her trying to play as her son Jay, which obviously she was pretty terrible at. I mean, one of my favorite moments of the season is when Tim completely clocked her identity. And you were just seeing her like flipping through her book, looking at her notes and everything. It was a pretty fun moment. But I did find her relationship with Sammy to be a pretty interesting one, as they were both catfishing each other as each other. Like, it was a really strange thing that happened. Brooke was someone that was a lot of fun at the beginning of the season. I really liked her relationship with Georgina and Tim, but she started to get less and less prevalent as the season went on, and by the time of her elimination, I felt like she was probably one of the least impactful players of the season. And I really don't know why, considering it seemed like she was a really fun personality, especially in their interview with Emma, which was really fantastic with all her reactions to all these reveals. It was really, really fun, but for some reason on the show, she just was pretty boring in that middle section of the game. Now we can talk about Beth and Jack, who I think individually were pretty boring. I don't feel like they brought much to this season until they were forced to play together as Joyce, and once that happened, I do think they became pretty good comic relief, but still, again, they were pretty unimpactful at the end of the day. Sayo was a really weird one on this season, as she was playing as Josh, this really generic, boring white guy, when she was like anything but that. I mean, I feel like she just played as herself. She would have been a much better player in the game, and probably would have been able to build bonds with people like Brooke and Georgina, but instead, everyone just suspected her of being a catfish, and she gets taken out right away. But it was pretty interesting from a social experiment aspect to see this, but again, from a television standpoint, it's just like, what was the point of this? Jan seemed like she could have been a fun character, but she was just barely there. I mean, she was only in a few episodes. She wasn't really given the opportunity to make many connections, so she really ends up being pretty forgettable, as she was the last to enter and left right away afterwards. Ella was someone I found pretty fun for most of the time there. I mean, she was never really into the game itself, but she was just so likable to the others that she was always rated highly, despite entering late. I mean, she was the target of the circle of trust. And that's really why she ends up going home, being the first victim of a big strategic move in the Circle history so far. But I am disappointed that they never really showed us the actual conversation that led to her elimination, as we never saw why Tim gave in to Georgina there. But now we're up to the final 5, which were all the finalists, a change from last season where it ended at the final 4 instead. And I liked it from the standpoint that it makes the vote for the winner more varied, with more votes for the winner, obviously, and also with this new ranking system, it makes it more likely that the winner is going to be the true popular player, instead of what happened in season 1 where everyone's trying to game the system. But something I don't love about the final 5 is that obviously it leaves more people in the finale, which leaves me with less of a sense of finality in the game. Now, I might as well talk about the finale as well now, and I still don't like the finale format. I didn't like it in season 1, I don't like it here. I don't like that most of the finale is just exit interviews with the finalists, and it very much felt like Emma and the producers had an agenda with the types of questions that they were asking. I did find the final meeting to be pretty disappointing. Everyone was pretty happy-go-lucky, but we eventually got to the viewers' champion, award, which did go to Tim, which was pretty obvious. But then we get to the actual results and we see the true brilliance of the Circle of Trust, as with them having the majority in this final 5 and also actually voting for each other, they were guaranteed first, second, third place in the rankings. And that's what we get. We get Woody in last. We get Sammy and Tim tied for third, Georgina in second, and Patty ends up winning the game. And let's talk about all of them. So let's talk about Woody. Woody is a pretty likable presence. I thought he was a really fun person on this season, but he just had no strategic agency throughout this season outside of like finding catfishes. But he was a fun character, even though I never really saw him as a winner candidate here. Tim was an all-time great reality television character, in my opinion. I mean, his witty comments, along with his aloofness on how to use social media, was just fantastic to watch. I do think he had a very strong read on the other players and was overall just a really well-liked person within the game. But I don't think his mind was in the game. I do think he was someone that wasn't really thinking about his chances to win. He was really only thinking about getting the likable people to the end and see how it plays out. And I felt like he was also pretty hypocritical about it. I mean, he reacted very negatively when people would try to play the game when he himself was voting out allies like Brooke and Ella. But he does seem like a great guy, and he was really great TV. He was a really fun character to watch. He was also very blatantly production's favorite, where I feel like it's come out since then that the edit really protected him in terms of his bad reads on people. But it is what it is. Now for Sammy or James, I think along with Alex or Kate from last season, I think he is probably the most influential player of the Circle coming into next season. I mean, he played the game strategically and was able to build a resistance to the majority that was able to take control of the game. However, I don't think he ever wins the game. I mean, with the way the final voting works, I don't think he wins in any scenario. I mean, after he decides to forego his strategic gameplay during the final voting, he really had no shot, and even if he did, he had a very small shot anyway. But I liked him as a player, and I could see people playing more like him in the future, like playing a very strategic game. But I could also see people being disgusted by the way he played, as it seems like the public is at this point. But I do hope his gameplay makes the public realize that this is a game instead of your typical British reality show where the good guy needs to win. But based on the social media reactions that I've seen from the British public, it doesn't seem like that's really happening. Next up, we got Georgina, who was a really fun character throughout the season as well. I mean, she was someone that I was definitely rooting for the entire season. I was pretty happy that she started playing the game strategically towards the end of the game. I loved her reactions to all of the alerts. I was pretty disappointed when she didn't win, even though, to be fair, I do think the winner played better while he was there than Georgina did throughout the entire game. But considering Georgina was there from the very beginning, I would have rather had her or Sammy win the game than the actual winner, which we'll talk about right now. And the winner is Patty, which again, I felt like him winning was pretty disappointing. I mean, not because he didn't play a good game. I thought he was actually a pretty good kind of player while he was there. Again, with the Circle, it's a bit tough. But there are things that I can point to while he was there that he did extremely well. I mean, he didn't even join the game until episode 10, so that's pretty much, halfway through the game, which obviously is a disadvantage in terms of positioning, but also gives you an advantage as you're closer to the end of the game. And Patty was very lucky with the time that he actually came into the game, as he was obviously safe for the first round after he came in, and every round after that, until the final round before the finale, there was another person that came in after him, also in the running for elimination. So that definitely does benefit him at the end of the day, and he does survive that final 6 due to the Circle of Trust, so you have to commend him for that. Again, that's kind of why I do say he is a good player, because he was able to build such a good bond with Sammy and eventually Georgina that they were able to keep him alive through that final 6, put him in the position at the final 5 where he is a very likely winner. It's either him or Georgina there due to the way the final ratings work. So again, you gotta commend him for that. And again, he was just very well liked by the time of those final ratings. He got surprisingly high scores from people like Tim and Woody, and also got the first place scores from his 2 closest allies. So he technically was the most popular. But again, due to him being a late entry, I did find him winning to be kind of a letdown when he was against people who had been there since day 1. But obviously, again, that's not really his choice, as it's really up to the producers of when you get to enter the game. So overall, my feelings on this season is that it was fine. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like this season was more fine than season 1, but But I felt like the rawness of season 1 was a big portion of why I loved it. I mean, I think with the addition of the live show and some really questionable editing choices, it made the season feel a lot more manufactured by the producers. Like we were seeing the story that they wanted to force upon us instead of what actually happened. And I also just found this show to be pretty slow in that middle third of the season. And while it does pick up towards the end with the Circle of Trust, that even only lasted for a few episodes. And I just feel like this season was a massive letdown after coming from season 1, which was an overall far superior season of reality television in my eyes. But with that being said, it's not a bad season of television, it's just a pretty inconsistent one. Where like season 1 of The Circle, I would consider a top tier season of reality television. I would consider this like a middle tier. Like it's not a terrible show, it's not something I would say you should never watch, but it's certainly not the best that it could have been. So that's my review of series 2 of The Circle. Again, I do overall enjoy the series as a whole and hope that the game continues to evolve in a more strategic way. And I am excited for the US version that is coming next year. I'll definitely be doing a review of it when that's done, and I also do plan on doing a video on why you should watch The Circle, though obviously if you're watching this, that probably doesn't really apply to you, but whatever. Probably will do more videos on The Circle UK in the future as well. But for now, that's the video. Thank you for watching.